Venezuela. The name itself sings a song of exploration and wonder. It is a country located on the northern coast of South America, a place of astonishing natural beauty. Here, the Caribbean Sea laps against pristine beaches, its turquoise waters hiding vibrant coral reefs. Further inland, the landscape transforms dramatically. The mighty Andes Mountains rise in the west, their jagged peaks often dusted with snow, a stark contrast to the tropical heat below. And then there are the vast, sprawling plains known as Los Llanos, an immense savanna that floods in the rainy season, creating a temporary wetland teeming with life. It is a land of extremes, a tapestry woven with mountains, jungles, and coastlines. This is a nation defined by its remarkable geography. One can journey from the sun-drenched shores of the Caribbean to the cool, misty heights of the Andes in a matter of hours. The Orinoco River carves its way through the country, its delta fanning out into a labyrinth of waterways. And perhaps most famously, Venezuela is home to Angel Falls. The natural world here is not simply a backdrop, it is the very soul of the land. Long before European sails appeared on the horizon, this land was alive with the voices and activities of its first inhabitants. Archaeological evidence suggests that humans first arrived in what is now Venezuela at least 15,000 years ago. These early peoples were hunter-gatherers, moving with the seasons and in pursuit of game. They crafted stone tools with remarkable skill instruments that allowed them to hunt large animals and process plants for food. They lived in small nomadic groups, their lives deeply intertwined with the natural cycles of the world around them. Their understanding of the environment was not academic, it was a matter of survival, a deep knowledge passed down through countless generations. Over thousands of years, these early societies evolved and diversified. Along the coast near the great rivers, communities began to flourish. The Carib peoples, skilled navigators, formidable warriors, dominated the northeastern coast, the nearby islands. They built impressive canoes, allowing them to travel vast distances across the sea for trade and warfare. Further inland, the Arawak-speaking peoples established complex agricultural societies, cultivating maize, yucca beans. They developed sophisticated pottery, intricate weaving techniques. Their villages were organized, their societies stable, their connection to the land profound. In the Andean highlands, groups like the Timoto Cuica created a different way of life. They built terraced fields on the steep mountainsides, a clever feat of engineering that allowed them to farm in the challenging terrain. They constructed their homes from stone, lived in well-organized villages, developed a complex social and political structure. Their world was one of mountain spirits, agricultural deities, their beliefs shaped by the towering peaks and fertile valleys. These were not simple societies, but complex civilizations, each uniquely adapted to its specific corner of this diverse land, with its own language, customs, and worldview. In 1498. On his third voyage, Columbus sailed along the coast of the Paria Peninsula in eastern Venezuela. He was enchanted by the lush landscape and by the gentle currents. He called it the Land of Grace, believing he'd found a terrestrial paradise. A year later, another expedition, including Amerigo Vespucci, ventured into the Gulf of Venezuela. There they saw stilt houses rising from the waters of Lake Maracaibo. The dwellings reminded them of the city of Venice, so they named the region Venezuela, Little Venice. The name stuck. The Spanish arrival marked the beginning of a profound and often brutal transformation. They were driven by a thirst for gold and by a desire to spread Christianity. Spanish conquistadors began the process of colonization. The initial encounters were often violent. Indigenous peoples, particularly the Caribs, fiercely resisted. The Spanish possessed superior weaponry: steel swords, crossbows, firearms. More devastating than any weapon were the diseases they brought: smallpox, measles, influenza. Native populations had no immunity. Epidemics swept through communities, causing catastrophic decline. Over the next century, Spain solidified its control over the region. They founded cities like Cumana, the first permanent European settlement on mainland South America, and Caracas, which would eventually become the capital. The colonial economy was built on the exploitation of the land and its people. The Spanish established the encomienda system. Colonists forced indigenous communities to provide labor in mines and to work on plantations. When the indigenous population dwindled, the Spanish began importing enslaved Africans. This added another layer of complexity and tragedy to colonial society. By the late 18th century, the winds of change were blowing across the Atlantic. The ideas of the Enlightenment, concepts of liberty, equality, and the rights of man had taken root in Europe and inspired the American Revolution and inspired the French Revolution. These revolutionary ideals found fertile ground among the educated Criollo elite in Venezuela. They were wealthy and powerful, yet they were treated as second-class citizens by the Spanish crown. They chafed under the economic restrictions that forced them to trade only with Spain and resented the political power wielded exclusively by the Peninsulares. A desire for self-rule, for a nation of their own, began to smoulder. The catalyst for open rebellion came in 1808, when Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Spain and deposed King Ferdinand VII. This created a power vacuum in the Spanish colonies. With the legitimate king imprisoned, many in Venezuela argued that sovereignty should return to the people. On April 19, 1810, the leading citizens of Caracas deposed the Spanish governor and established a local governing board, or junta, in the name of the king. While they initially claimed to be ruling on behalf of the deposed monarch, this was a crucial first step towards full independence. The ties that had bound Venezuela to Spain for 3 centuries were beginning to unravel. The movement quickly radicalized. On July 5, 1811, led by passionate figures like Francisco de Miranda, a veteran of the American Revolution and the French Revolution, Venezuela became the first of Spain's American colonies to formally declare its independence. The First Republic of Venezuela was born. However, its life was short and tragic. A devastating earthquake in 1812 was interpreted by many as divine punishment, further weakening the patriot cause. By the end of the year, the First Republic had collapsed. From the chaos and failure of the First Republic rose a figure of monumental importance, Simón Bolívar. Born into a wealthy Criollo family in Caracas, Bolívar was a man of immense intellect, ambition, and unwavering determination. Educated in Europe, he had absorbed the ideals of the Enlightenment and had sworn an oath on a hill in Rome to not rest until he had liberated his homeland from Spanish rule. The collapse of the First Republic did not break his spirit. It only hardened his resolve. He became the driving force, the heart and soul of the South American independence movement, earning him the title El Libertador, or the Liberator. Bolívar was, honestly, a brilliant military strategist and an inspirational leader. After the fall of the First Republic, he led a series of daring campaigns, fighting against seemingly impossible odds. His famous admirable campaign of 1813 saw him lead a small army from neighboring New Granada, what we now call Colombia, back into Venezuela, recapturing Caracas and establishing the Second Republic. Like the first, it too would fall to royalist forces. Yet Bolívar refused to give up. He understood that to win, he needed to broaden the appeal of the independence movement beyond the Criollo elite. So he began to promise freedom to enslaved people who joined his army and land to the llaneros, the tough cattle-herding horsemen of the plains. His vision extended far beyond the borders of Venezuela. Bolívar dreamed of a united South America, a federation of free republics strong enough to resist the influence of European powers and the rising might of the United States. His forces achieved decisive victories, most notably at the Battle of Boyacá in 1819 and the Battle of Carabobo in 1821, which effectively secured the independence of Venezuela and Colombia. Despite his military triumphs, Bolívar's political dream of a united continent ultimately proved fragile. The vast distances, regional differences, and political rivalries were just too great to overcome. By 1830, Gran Colombia had fractured into the separate nations of Venezuela, Colombia, and Ecuador. Though his Grand Federation did not survive, his legacy is immeasurable. For much of the 19th century after independence, Venezuela was a largely agrarian nation plagued by political instability and civil wars dominated by rival military strongmen, caudillos. The economy relied on agricultural exports, coffee, cacao. The country remained poor and sparsely populated. Life barely changed from the colonial era. Beneath the surface in the Lake Maracaibo Basin lay vast petroleum seepages. For centuries, indigenous people used the black seepages for medicinal uses to caulk their canoes. Its full value was not yet understood. In 1914, the first major oil well, Mene Grande, was drilled. In 1922, Los Barrosos II blew out in a spectacular gusher. It spewed an estimated 100,000 barrels per day. For 9 days, foreign oil companies arrived. From the United States, from Europe. The age of black gold had begun. Oil transformed Venezuela rapidly, from an agricultural backwater to a top global exporter. By the late 1920s, Venezuela was second only to the United States in oil production. Money flooded government coffers, the state paid off its entire foreign debt and launched ambitious modernization projects. Roads were paved, ports were built. Caracas began to modernize. A massive migration reshaped society. People left the countryside, sought work in oil fields and moved to growing cities. A new middle class emerged. Oil wealth funded infrastructure, healthcare, education. But the miracle had a cost. The economy became dependent on a single commodity. That dependency would bring complex, far-reaching consequences in coming decades. The oil wealth that flooded into Venezuela during the mid-20th century was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it financed a period of remarkable development and, for a time, political stability. From 1958, the country enjoyed a sustained period of democratic rule, a rarity in a region often dominated by military dictatorships. Two main political parties alternated in power, creating a system that seemed to promise stability and progress. The government used its vast oil revenues to subsidize food, healthcare, education, creating a generous welfare state. Caracas became a symbol of modernity, with gleaming skyscrapers, highways, a vibrant cultural scene attracting immigrants from across Europe and South America. This era of prosperity, however, masked underlying problems. The economy became dangerously over-reliant on oil, a condition often called the Dutch disease. As petrodollars flowed in, other sectors of the economy, such as agriculture and manufacturing, were neglected and withered. The country that once fed itself began to import most of its food. The value of its currency was tied to the volatile price of oil on the world market. When oil prices were high, the country boomed and the government spent lavishly. But when prices fell, as they did dramatically in the 1980s, the entire economy went into crisis. The illusion of endless wealth was shattered. The immense wealth also fostered a culture of corruption and inequality. While the middle classes and upper classes benefited enormously from the oil boom, vast numbers of people remained trapped in poverty. They lived in sprawling slums, or barrios, that clung precariously to the hillsides surrounding the wealthy city centres. They saw the evidence of immense national wealth all around them, but felt that its benefits were not being shared fairly. This growing gap between the rich and the poor created deep social tensions and a widespread sense of frustration. In 1998, the deep public discontent found a voice in Hugo Chavez, a charismatic former army officer who had led a failed coup attempt 6 years earlier. He ran for president on a platform of radical change, promising to dismantle the old, corrupt political system and use the country's oil wealth to benefit the poor. He won the election by a landslide, ushering in the Bolivarian Revolution, named after Simón Bolívar, a fundamental turning point. Once in power, Chavez drafted a new constitution, consolidated political power, and launched the Misiones. Funded by high oil prices in the 2000s, the programs provided food, healthcare, education, and built loyalty. Economically, the government increased state control, nationalized key industries, especially the oil sector, and imposed price controls and currency controls. His anti-imperialist rhetoric put him at odds with the United States and traditional elites, deepening polarization. After Chavez's death in 2013, Nicolas Maduro took power. His presidency overlapped with a collapse in global oil prices, devastating Venezuela's undiversified, state-controlled economy. Revenues fell, causing severe shortages of food, medicine, and other basic goods. Crisis spiraled into hyperinflation, currency became virtually worthless, savings wiped out. The economy contracted sharply, among the worst in peacetime history. That collapse produced a humanitarian crisis and mass exodus, millions leaving the country. Years of intense political conflict followed. The opposition won the National Assembly in 2015, challenged Maduro's legitimacy, creating a prolonged standoff. International sanctions from the United States aim to pressure the government, yet are also blamed for worsening the crisis. The situation is complex, a deeply divided society competing narratives. Understanding this requires looking at the historical forces, economic forces, and political forces that brought Venezuela here. The story of Venezuela is a sweeping saga, natural splendor, human struggle, immense wealth, profound challenges. Yet beyond headlines lies the enduring spirit of the Venezuelan people. The hope remains that, drawing on deep reserves of strength and resilience, people will navigate the tempest and find a horizon of stability and prosperity for all.